Hey guys, I'm not here today. Wish I was, but sorry I can't be. You're going to be doing a lab today in the class, and it's critical that you follow these directions exactly as they're written on this lab sheet that you've got in front of you here. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to read this first, to read through it and understand the steps, and then I'm going to come back after you've read through it and explain some of the more complicated motions to you. So thank you guys. All right, so as you had a chance to look through this, I want to go through some of the points with you. And what we're doing in this lab is comparing two substances. One of them is sugar and one of them is salt. And we're checking to see if they exhibit the characteristics of an ionic bond or a covalent bond. The characteristics of ionic bonds can be found on page 44 in your interactive notebook. So as you make the determination about whether this is a covalent bond or an ionic bond, use the information you've got highlighted. It was one of the last things we wrote on page 42 in there. So in order to do this, you're going to need some materials. Every group is going to need two of these. These are the glass beakers that we'll use. You're going to need a weigh boat like this thing. They should be located at the stations there for you. There are two plastic containers of distilled water. It's important that you use these and not water out of the tap because you will get false positives if you use water out of the tap. This stuff is pure water and has no contamination in it, so it's important you use these. And you're going to be using this digital scale that's here. So these are the primary components of what you're going to be using today, in addition to a conductivity probe and some hot plates, which I'll explain as we go through. So one of the first things you're going to do is you're going to put 3 grams of substance A. Substance A is the salt. It will be marked substance A in a little beaker at your table. You're going to weigh out 3 grams of substance A and put it into one of these containers. To do that, what you'll do is, on the scale, you'll place this little weigh boat. It's not going to sit on here because it's diagonal for me. But you'll place this on here, and then you'll see that there are buttons on here. One says on/0 off. Once you put this container on there, you're going to click that button, the on/0 button, and that will zero out the scale. So it won't be measuring the weight of this. It will only be measuring the weight of the salt that you'll pour in there. So at that point in time, you are going to take the salt container, the beaker that you've got of salt, and pour 3 grams of it into this weigh boat. Once that is completed, we're going to move on to the next step. Next step is exactly the same, except you're going to be using sugar instead of salt. So you'll take 3 grams of sugar, weigh it out on the scale just exactly as you did before. And it's critical that the beakers you're using are absolutely clean and dry. If they've got any contamination in them, you're going to be getting some false positives. So that means you're going to have to use this jug of water to rinse those things out before you even begin. Rinse them and then dry them all the way with a paper towel. Be careful not to touch the edges of it or anything like that because that'll contaminate it. So like I said, get the sugar in there and then we're on to the next step. All right, next step you're going to do is you're going to use this instrument. This is called a conductivity probe. It measures if the substance, these 2 probes that you can see down here at the bottom, these 2 things, they measure if the substance that they're touching conducts electricity. So what you're going to do with the dry substances, you've got salt in one of these and sugar in the other, you'll take these probes and place them into the beaker into the dry substances down there. If it's conductive, this little LED, light emitting diode at the top, will turn red. It'll start glowing. And you'll do the same thing with the sugar and then record those results. At that point in time, you're going to move on to the next step, which is to add to the dry components that you've got in there about 10 milliliters of this stuff. So 10 milliliters of this into these jars with the dry sugar and the dry salt, which will now, of course, be in water. Once you've got that in there, you're going to swirl it around like this. Swirl the water with the salt, water with the sugar, and then repeat the same process you just did. You'll take the conductivity probe, place it in there, and record your results again. Results for this are recorded right here. You've got dry conductivity, and that's a yes or no, and then in distilled water conductivity, that's a yes or no. Last step you got here involves the melting points of these things. So again, you're going to go through the process of weighing out 3 grams of salt and 3 grams of sugar and putting them in dry, clean beakers like these things. Once they're in a dry, clean beaker, 3 grams of each, You're going to place it on a hot plate that are located at the stations around the room. It's critical that you put them on a cold hot plate. If you put a cold glass container onto a warm hot plate, what will happen is it will break. So have the hot plate off, put your 3 grams in these things, place them on the hot plate, and turn it up. As soon as you turn these things on to high, you want to start a timer so that you're recording the amount of time these things are heating up for. What you're doing is checking to see the melting point, because they should be heating at about the same rate since they're on the same hot plate. You'll be able to see which one of these has the lower melting point, the sugar or the salt, and you'll record those observations back here where you've got the time it took to melt. If you make it to 10 minutes and it hasn't melted, then that's it. You don't go any further than that. You can turn the hot plate off, and you'll want to leave that glassware on there for a little bit. Otherwise, it will be too hot to touch. One of those substances you'll see as soon as it starts, one of them will melt, one of them may melt. But as soon as the first one melts, you want to take it off of there pretty rapidly. So you want to be looking at that the whole time it's melting. If you leave it on there too long, it's going to begin to smoke, and then it's going to cause a problem for you trying to clean out your glassware at the end, because you've got to leave the lab station just as you found it, clean, dry, and in good shape. When you're all done, you've got some post-lab analysis questions to handle at the bottom here, and that's what you've got to work on today. So follow the directions of your teacher and carry this lab out. This will be due the next time I'm with you guys, which is tomorrow. So thank you. All right, so the last bit you got to worry about here are just some safety instructions, and that is that the hot plates are exceedingly hot when you go to touch them or remove stuff from them. So when you go to take the melted beakers, the beakers that have the melted substance inside of them off of there, please make sure you've got like an insulator in between your hand and them so you don't put your bare skin onto these beakers and burn yourself. A paper towel works well if you can do it kind of quickly. And don't set these things into water when they're still hot. That'll crack them too. So there's that. And then the last part of the cleanup is please leave your lab station as you found it, which is clean, dry, and everything in working order with none of the crystals on the table or anything like that. And that'll handle it. Thank you, guys.